ALP, 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 ALP. That's right. He's back for a third time here on the Sports Report. And at this point, we like to have him on here each and every month and talk about all the latest happenings here in KOW and Knockout Wrestling, which has become a company we've become very close with and a company that's been very important to the success and the past, present, and future of Sportinarium and especially the Sports Report. And he's back to kick things off here tonight, somebody that has done a phenomenal job on behalf of KOW. And we're even going to talk about him because he was involved actually in a match that we're going to talk about here shortly, and he's been the heart and soul of KOW. He's pretty much done it all. He's been a general manager, he's been a booker, he's been a promoter, and he's even done what I've done here in terms of introducing people and being an MC. So there's no better person on here to kick off tonight's show and the week shows here on the Sports Report and on Sportinarium. And without further ado, here on the Sports Report, the number one global sports show, booker and promoter of KOW, my friend, welcome back.
Tom, thanks for having me back, bud. Another fantastic interview as I've come to expect at this point. Very happy to be back on the Sports Report and chatting to you again.
I'm happy to have you back. It's always good to talk with you, my friend. I always feel like the time we speak, it goes by almost like a summer wind here as we're now coming into summer season and all the great things that everybody is happy for at this time of year. And my friend, to kick things off, and I want to talk about this match, because originally I had a different idea of how I wanted to start things off with you, because I think since we've last spoke, I've spoke with a who's who of people on behalf of KOW, and arguably the most important person that we've ever had on when it comes to KOW is the legendary Sheriff Steele, but we'll get into that, I have no doubt, in a little while. But I want to talk about a classic KOW match that you guys released on the Facebook page, and everybody can follow KOW on Facebook at Knockout W, and also on Twitter at KO_wrestling, and on Instagram at K_O_wrestling, and find out why KOW is our favorite promotion, and it's why it's one of the premier promotions, obviously, not only in the UK, but across all professional wrestling. But this was a 30-minute Iron Man match between Craig Collins and Chris Ridgway. And I don't know if we'd seen a match before this in KOW or if we'll ever see a match in KOW like this. And you actually were involved in the match, and it was a stipulation that actually was involving you, ALP. So I think we actually now get to talk about you a little bit more when it comes to you being involved in a match. And obviously it was control of KOW was on the line here, and Chris Ridgway was the champion going into this, and he hadn't lost in almost 2 years. He was almost like your guy's version of Goldberg in terms of his undefeated streak, and you could tell that he was going places. He had something about him. You could definitely tell in the War Machine, Craig Collins, and the crowd was really behind him, and he was battling the triad, obviously, and you were involved in that. So for a worldwide audience, to kick things off, talk about this classic match that you've unearthed and released for everybody and all the KOW fans here on Sportinarium. So to kick things off, ALP, talk about your memories of the Craig Collins versus Chris Ridgway 30-minute Iron Man match for control of KOW and for Chris Ridgway's KOW World Heavyweight Championship.
So yeah, this match, to me personally, it's my favourite match in the entire history of the company, and obviously, hopefully, when we do come back to action this year, it'll have been 9 years of running KOW shows, so that's quite a big statement, and I think it still is one of the most important matches in KOW history as well. As you mentioned, you know, it was basically the pinnacle of the war between KOW and the Triad, which had been going on for almost 2 years at this point. A very brief summary of that is basically that Taylor West, after he lost the heavyweight championship, he and Chris Ridgway came together. Ridgway because he basically felt underappreciated and that he deserved a better position in KOW, and Taylor West because he was basically furious about having lost the title. And the two of them decided that if they weren't going to get what they wanted, you know, with other people in charge, with me as general manager and with, you know, KOW management running the show, that they were going to take over by any means necessary. So, you know, obviously I won't go over the entire history because it is a very long one, but over the following, you know, the couple of years that it was going on, they They recruited new members. They brought in people from outside of the company, like Dan Maloney and Chris Brooks and Damian Dunn, and really became a massive force and a massive threat. Chris Ridgway became the heavyweight champion and was sort of the in-ring head of the triad. Taylor West was, of course, the leader. He wasn't wrestling at the time, but he was the mastermind, the guy moving all the chess pieces to get what he wanted. And yeah, finally, this match, the first time we'd ever done a 30-minute Ironman match, which was a big thing for us to do. It's a big challenge to take on for the wrestlers and for everybody involved. And yeah, and this was the culmination. Craig Collins had just won the Road to Gold 2 tournament, the second ever Road to Gold tournament, so he'd earned a title shot. He challenged Ridgway to wrestle Riot and made the stipulation a 30-minute Ironman match. And of course, Chris at this time, like you mentioned, was undefeated for 2 years, hadn't been pinned, submitted, hadn't been beaten in any way in 2 years. And so Ridgway, even though he was, despicable and leader of, part of a group that was trying to take over the company, he was proud and thought that he was the best wrestler in the company. Collins felt the same, and in my opinion, these two were, no disrespect to anybody else on the roster at that time, but these two were the best two wrestlers in the company at that time, and they came together for this match. Earlier on in the night, myself and Taylor West had actually had an in-ring confrontation where we basically finally made it clear how we felt about each other, basically. And then the stipulation was added because basically I just wanted it to end. I was like, it's been going on for long enough. There's been too much carnage. Too many people have been hurt. It's if we don't stop it now, it's going to keep raging on, and more negative things might end up happening. So I made the stipulation, if West agreed, that if Ridgway retained the title, that I would step down as general manager and Taylor West would get that position and basically take over the company. And if Collins won and was the new champion, the triad would end, be forced to disband, never to be seen again. Taylor West would be forced out of the company. West, he's a fan of it. He likes a gamble, does West. So I knew that going into it. And I was like, well, if I play to that, he was known as the high roller in a former persona of his. So I was like, if I play to what he likes, if I play to his penchant for a bit of gambling, maybe he'll go for it. And yeah, so that's basically how the match came to be. That's sort of everything that happened before the bell rang. And of course, when the bell did ring, everything else happened.
This match was a bit different, I think, than what we've seen recently when it comes to KOW. And obviously, we talked a lot about Lucas Neon and 2-Bit with Lucas Neon when he was on the show last month. But ALP, I felt that there was something different with this match. I don't want to say it was an old school type of match, but there was some type of begrudging respect almost, in a sense, for Chris Ridgway because of the technical skills that he brought out in that match. And Craig Collins, I think, was somebody that could go toe-to-toe with Chris in his ring skills. Talk about the match, maybe in some of the differences than the KOW match of the year of 2019 that we talked about a few weeks ago, and that was Lucas Neon versus 2-Bit. So for our worldwide audience listening here on Sportinarium, talk about, you think, some of the differences in these two type of matches.
Yeah, I mean, when we did the top 10 list of 2019, my measuring stick was that Ironman match, and obviously before we released it, I hadn't seen it in a long time myself, and the match between 2-Bit and Lucas Neon, I definitely thought was a match that could challenge the Ironman match for being the best match or the most important match in KOW history. I think obviously they're both stipulation matches, very different stipulations, admittedly. Obviously one is more focused on the wrestling and, the ability to beat the other person in terms of the number of falls. Like say, it was a very technical match, especially earlier on in terms of the Ironman match. And then obviously the TLC match is much more prone to carnage and wanton destruction and, that sort of thing. So they're very different matches, but in terms of their importance, I think in terms of the atmosphere and the investment from the fans, I think they're much more equal in those regards. The reactions for both matches were insane, and I think they were both perfectly timed. So the culmination of the war between the KOW and the Triad, the fans were at the point where they wanted to see that conclusion. It had been built and built and built, and the same with Neon and 2-Bit, not only in terms of the match, but in terms of, again, they're both very similar. They've both got, a guy that the fans hated, who I see a lot of similarities between in 2-Bit and Chris Ridgway, who were the champions, and then, the lucky up-and-coming challenger in both scenarios, Neon and Collins. Neon was trying to win his first showcase trophy. Collins was trying to win his first heavyweight championship. Both hometown boys that the fans had really gotten behind. So there's definitely a lot of parallels and similarities there. In terms of even getting down to, the outside interference, of course, in Neon and 2-Bit, you had the on the Class and the Freak Show getting involved for a time. And then, of course, in the Iron Man match, you had the Triad, members of the KOW roster, myself, Taylor West getting involved. So there definitely are a lot of parallels there. And I think one of the cool things that we may well have touched on later if we would continue to talk, but one of, I think, especially the coolest things about the Iron Man match, looking back on it, is the future of KOW was there as well. So Lucas Neon, 2-Bit, and Will Carter, so two of the three people in that match were watching in the front row, and those three were actually brought into the ring by Collins at the end of the match because they were training at the time. And so that's cool to look back on the fact that, you know, back when this Iron Man match happened, they were just young trainees who look very different to how they look now, and now they're on shows and are the peer of a Craig Collins or a Chris Ridgway. And also, I don't know if you spotted him, but he has mentioned it publicly on social Twitter, but Rick Marcus, this was also his first KOW show he attended, and if you watch carefully in the footage, you can actually see him in the crowd watching. So literally this match, 4 of the biggest stars KOW has produced from the academy were in attendance. For Rick, it was his very first show, and for 2-Bit, for Lucas Neon and Will Carter, it was the very first time they stepped foot in a KOW ring in front of the fans. So I think that's really cool, and the fact that, like, say now, the best match of 2019 featured 2 of those people, and obviously again the other one was Will Carter, who was all over that list, Rick Marcus, who was all over that list, you know, was the number 2. So it's cool. The Iron Man match, as well as being a great match itself, like I say, is very important historically to KOW, like say partially just because of all the story repercussions that would go on to stretch over the next few years, but also just because, like say, 4 of the biggest stars, you know, that would eventually rise through the ranks were all in attendance at that show and watched that match. And I'm sure they would all say that that match had a big influence on them and where they ended up going, you know, in their careers.
Were you surprised that the crowd reacted the way it did for Craig Collins? Because you think about a 30-minute match, and even in a main event, sometimes for an attention span, that's a long time. But that match, the 30 minutes went by like a walk in the park. Very similar to the Lucas Neon and 2-Bit match. Sometimes you have matches and they go, let's say, past 15 minutes. You're kind of like, all right, get to the finish. With this, I mean, literally, even up to the last seconds, you were on the edge of your seat. I mean, this was a really, really well done match. I mean, were you blown away by the crowd and how much they were into this match?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely was. Of course, going into it, that's what you hope for. You hope that, especially after, you know, having this story going on for a couple of years, that's what you're looking for, is that obviously everybody's going to be so invested. I mean, in terms of hot streaks or popularity, you know, Collins' run to becoming heavyweight champion is up there with the most popular anyone has ever been in KOW. The other comparisons I can think of is Neon before he won the Showcase Trophy, and the other one I mentioned is Nightmare before he won the heavyweight championship for the second time when he was was crossing paths with me, and we were having our difficulties, to put it nicely. But yeah, I mean, Collins, when the company started, was actually a bad guy and wasn't liked by the fans, and it was, you know, the involvement of the Triad that convinced him to turn over a new leaf and sort of get on the same page as a lot of the other guys, because for a long time he was the only person who hadn't sort of declared his loyalty. You know, West had sort of courted him and tried to see if he would join the Triad, and then myself and other members of the KOW roster had, you know, tried to convince Craig to join KOW side, and eventually he did. And when he did, you know, he was such a phenomenal wrestler at the time. He worked so hard, and the fans really appreciate and respect that when somebody does work really hard and wrestles really hard and gives their all. And by the time that he'd won Road to Gold and his title shot was coming, he was the hottest guy in the company, the most popular guy in the company. In terms of the match, like you say, I don't think it really could have gone any better. There was action throughout. There was the drama of the Triad getting involved, the other members of the Triad getting involved and being ejected from the venue. You know, there was mine, Taylor West's moment in the ring as well. And like you say, by the time it ended, you know, 2 falls each, tied, less than a minute left. Collins locks in the knee bar. Like say, everyone in that venue, you know, there was not a single person in that venue who wanted anything more than for Chris to tap out and for Craig to finally win the title. And, you know, when you're putting together long-term stories and trying to get people invested, like you say, that's why it holds such a high position of like respect from me, is that I think everything about it was, for the time, was spot on. Like say, I watched it back and it was 2015, so this is 6 years later now, and there isn't anything I would have changed at all about it. I think it's what it was perfect in that moment. Like say, the crowd were completely behind it, and Craig Collins finally winning the heavyweight championship in his hometown is one of the most feel-good moments in company history still to this day.
I'm going to get to your spot in the match with Taylor West, Chris, but I'm going to ask you this question because I'm watching that match, and especially the ending of it, where Chris actually gives the War Machine, Craig Collins, the belt, and overall how Chris wrestled in that match. I'm going to ask you this question. Was that the match where crystallized Chris Ridgway is going to be today in the world of professional wrestling?
I think that was definitely one of the moments that solidified that opinion. But I sort of knew that Chris, and other people did as well, not just myself, of course, but I knew that Chris was going to go far and could be something special before then. It's just that it was seeing him develop and grow. But that was definitely one of the matches where I was like, yeah, he's really good. He's only going to get better as well. Because obviously this was only 3 years into his wrestling career, maybe a little bit less. So, considering he was having that sort of a match 3 years in, and again, I felt the same way about Collins. I was like, these two guys both should be big names, not only in the Northwest, but in the UK and, potentially further afield. Chris is obviously going to do that. Craig has gone on to work for a lot of other places as well, like myself and others have mentioned. We think Craig should be a lot more places than he is, but he's certainly done well for himself. And yeah, and like you mentioned, the moment of respect at the end, I think, I can't remember exactly when it was, but I remember having a conversation with Chris and saying, I don't think the fans want to boo you because they know how good you are and they respect how good of a wrestler you are. And again, I think this was some point after the triad, because after this ended, that was when Chris did, for a time was more of a fan favourite. But there was definitely a conversation at some point down the line where I said, I don't think the fans want to boo you. I think they will. I was like, if you're doing horrible things, they will boo you. But I think there's a lot of the fans who've been watching you long enough and know how good you are and respect your ability in the ring that they don't want to. Like, it was sort of begrudging. They'd be like, boo, but you are pretty good, but boo. You know what I mean? So I think that was definitely part of it. And yeah, obviously at the end of the match, I think Chris had, as much as Chris was part of the triad and wanted to take over, I think his personal goal was always to prove that he was the best. So I think when he lost and lost fair and square, any attempt to have any cheating or any shenanigans in that match was stopped. And from what I can recall of watching the match recently, Chris didn't break any of the rules because I think he legitimately wanted to prove he was better than Collins. And when he was beaten and when Taylor West got in his face and shoved him and it was over, that was the moment where Chris decided, right, the triad's done. Chris isn't the kind of guy who's going to stand for getting shoved around the ring, even by a guy, that he was stood by his side for the past couple of years, lays out Taylor West, which got an amazing reaction. And again, from that reaction from the fans, that was all it took. And the fans went from hating him to being like, yeah, and cheering him and chanting for him, and him giving Craig the title was, a big sign of respect. And again, the fans that earned a lot of respect back for Chris in that he took the loss with dignity. He accepted that he was beaten. His time at the top was done for the time being, and that it was Craig's moment, and he walked off sort of into the sunset. Obviously, he was back at the next show, but it's more poetic if I say it like that. And so Craig got his moment to shine.
Yeah, because I kind of think even watching the match that the fans, they didn't hate him like they hated 2-Bit, where 2-Bit or even a Rick Marcus, the Cumbrian Outlaw, the fans in KOW did not like the two of them. They despised them. But with Chris Ridgway, there was a respect level. It was almost as if like he was a Kenny Omega, a Shawn Michaels, where, yeah, they're bad guys, but you know how great of a wrestler that they are, and you really appreciate what they bring to the table. Even Chris getting the first pin with his feet on the ropes and all the different, maybe 5 to 6 minutes worth of back and forth and the different holds, and even Craig Collins with the belly-to-belly suplex. I mean, there was just so many great spots in that match. That's why everybody needs to watch this match here at Knockout W on Facebook and find out why Craig Collins and Chris Ridgway is one of the best matches in KOW history. We are talking all things KOW related. Once again, he's back by popular demand for a third time. That is the heart and soul of KOW. That's Booker and promoter ALP, who has pretty much done it all in KOW. And I am the host of the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show, the Reverend Tom Bryce, and also the station manager here on Sportinarium. So obviously very happy to be involved here with the station on a day-to-day basis, and we're talking all things related to KOW with ALP. And ALP, then I got to talk about your involvement in the match, because originally I was going to compare you more to a Paul Heyman in terms of being in the background of the match, but I didn't feel that way at all with you, because you were almost kind of anxious. You were almost very like tenuous in sort of watching the match here as it would play out. We would hear every 5 minutes or 10 minutes or so that the countdown with the clock would get a little closer and closer. And it was almost as if you were watching very anxiously here. It wasn't as if you were a typical manager that would try to distract the referee or would try to make himself more than what the match is. You were very cautious and very calculated in terms of your parts in the match, but there was obviously a big spot in the match with you and Taylor West, and you guys went at it, and you actually had done something that I think the KOW crowd was really waiting for, and they were very happy to see it. So for our worldwide audience listening here on Sportinarium, I mean, ALP, you got to fill us in on what's it like being outside the ring in a match like this, and your involvement, and you're taking out a Taylor West, and that very well might have also helped this match here and the outcome of what it was.
Yeah, so I mean, being on the outside for this match was, nerve-wracking to say the least, because obviously my job was on the line, the entire fate of the company was on the line. God knows what a triad rank KOW would have looked like. That's something that happened in an alternate reality. But yeah, I forgot about this until I watched the match back. But obviously, I was usually there anyway. Sometimes I'd be there as general manager. When I was ring announcer, obviously, I'd always be around the ring. But this time, Adam Rush was the ring announcer. But of course, I was going to be there for this match. And my only role being there for that match was to watch, like everybody else in the building. I wanted to see that match and find what the outcome was going to be, and when necessary, to step in to make sure Collins got his shot fair and square. But yeah, like I said, watching it back, I actually forgot that I'm holding the championship belt the entire match, which I honestly had forgotten about. But you can see me sort of clutching it, and I think the reason is because it is the biggest prize in the company. In terms of that match, it was literally the key to the entire company's future. Whoever left with that title would get to determine where the company was going to go. Was it going to be Ridgeway and the Triad with Taylor West in charge and running mad with power? And I dread to think what they would have done, to be completely honest, God knows. Or was it going to be Collins, having killed off the Triad, the most popular guy in the company, leading things forward? So yeah, very, very nervous throughout. And earlier in the night when I'd confronted Taylor West, I'd made it very clear that, I said to him, I was like, I might be an out of shape, chubby ring announcer, but my job's on the line. The company that I helped build is on the line. And so if I have to get involved, I will get involved. And that was what I was there for. My goal for that match was, I know Taylor West so well. I knew he would get involved. He didn't come out with Ridgeway, but I knew from the start of the match, I was like, Taylor West is going to show up. If he's at risk of being kicked out of the company, there's no way he's not going to get involved. And so I was ready. I had my trusty kendo stick stored under the ring for when he did decide to show up, and inevitably he did, and for a couple of minutes, he was just on the outside like I was, just there to support Collins and see the match play out. But it came to the point in the match where Collins and Ridgeway, both exhausted, laid each other out, both rolled to the side of the ring. West hops in because he wants to push. I assume he was going to run over and try and get to Collins. I'd maybe even attack the referee, which he'd done before, to try and get the Triad an advantage. I grabbed my kendo stick and got in the ring. I was shaking in my boots, to be absolutely honest. Taylor West is a very scary guy. He might not have been wrestling at the time, but, he was only a little while removed from when he was a wrestler. He was still in phenomenal shape. He could scare anyone. So, yeah, I stood across the ring from him. Going into it, I was like, I'm going to need something. So I had my kendo stick there ready to go. Rather arrogantly, he turned his back to me and offered me a free shot, I think, because he knew that I wouldn't do that, and I wasn't going to. As much as I wanted to, I couldn't hit a defenseless man. And then, turns back round, and to really rub the salt in the room, I don't think you can see it on the camera, but he said I was pathetic and then spat in my face. And that was sort of the moment when I saw Red hit him with the kendo stick. The fans had already started chanting for me. So the adrenaline was already going watching the match, but it went into overdrive when I started hearing the fans chanting my name, which I really didn't expect. Hit him with a kendo stick, and the place erupted, which again, I wasn't really expecting. Like we discussed previously, I was like, oh, is anybody going to care about this? Like, is anybody really going to care? And they really did, which was really nice. And yeah, you can see me, I'm pacing around. I'm really amped up. I'm trying to draw from the crowd, and Taylor gets back up, and I hit him again with a kendo stick so hard that the kendo stick actually broke. He actually see me glance at the top of it, so I'm like, oh, that broke. So yeah, a bit of kendo stick flying across the ring. My job was done. Taylor West had been dealt with. I rolled him out of the ring, and then went straight back outside to help Collins and cheer Collins back on. I wasn't there to pull a trick out of the Triads playbook and attack Ridgeway or try and give Collins an unfair advantage, but I was there to make sure that he was going to get his fair chance as much as possible. If I'd got in there and Taylor West had laid me out, if he'd have punched me in the face, if he'd hit me with a jackpot lariat or F5 me even, I would have taken that because that was what was needed. That was how high stakes that was. Obviously very glad that I didn't and that I actually came out on top. I was very surprised by that. But yeah, like for me, obviously, that's one of the coolest moments I've ever had in the company. It was really cool to be a part of, and of course, the fact that it to Collins ultimately winning the try and be defeated just made it all the sweeter.
Absolutely, and we're definitely very happy that you didn't take an F5. We're very happy that you didn't take a move that we would probably still be talking about 6 years later. So we're very happy with your involvement in the match. And one of the wrestlers that I actually saw at some point towards the end of the match and who we had him on a few weeks ago was Sheriff Steele. And I know we've talked about Sheriff Steele. We've talked a lot about Sheriff Steele in the past when it comes to KOW. And what were your reactions to some of the things that Sheriff Steele had to say when he came on the show a few weeks ago?
Yeah, I think it was a really interesting discussion. Obviously, when it comes to the Sheriff, he's done a lot in KOW, and of course, it's a shame that he is now retired from the company. Very interesting, even for me, who's obviously there for every beat of his journey, through KOW. It's very interesting listening to him talk about it, especially now with the context that he is retired. I'm sure that he's got a lot more appreciation for it and a lot more nostalgia for it. Because one of the things with running wrestling shows and running a wrestling company is a lot of the time you have to sort of dump things from memory. Like with us promoting a show, when we are running 5-6 shows a year, I've said people have come up to me before and said, oh, this thing from the last show. And I'm like, oh yeah, we did that on the last show, didn't we? And not because that thing was bad or wasn't memorable, but just because as soon as that show's done, what are the next matches? What's the next show? What's the next day? Like sometimes I can't remember the previous show date because all I'm thinking is the next show date is this one. So, I'm sure Sheriff has some of that where in the moment you almost don't appreciate things as much. So I definitely got a sense of that from him talking about his career and obviously all the different things that he's done. As I mentioned before, I don't know if I'm sure we will see at KOW shows, whether that be, to visit people and see old friends or whether that be to watch with his family. I don't know. But, I'm certain we'll see him again. And of course, he had a fascinating career, really. Sort of, like I said, the first Academy graduate, when he originally started out, he had his trial series. He was Gabriel Steele. He transformed into Sheriff Steele, which was great for him and something that really helped the fans get behind him. He had his wars with Rick Marcus. Of course, he was basically responsible for introducing the tag team division, which I know myself and numerous other people have talked about now. And then, of course, he got climbed to the top of the mountain, not to be disrespectful to the Sheriff in any way, but probably the most unlikely KOW champion ever. Definitely when he was starting out. And I'm sure, he said himself that he didn't ever imagine that he'd get there. But that's the thing, hard work, persistence, and the fans getting behind you can really propel you to greatness. And I think definitely, with him winning the Vertigo ladder match, King Ryan Grayson was a big part of that, and Royal Justice, and sort of Royal Justice was instrumental in him having single success as well. That took him from being a very popular wrestler to being one of the most loved guys in the company, and people, somebody that the fans really, really love to watch. And yeah, so to see him ascend to the top was a great moment. Obviously, his last year in the company was sort of marred with sort of, I don't want to say misery because that sounds really bad, but his last year in the company, he obviously lost the tag titles and lost the heavyweight title. Obviously, there was the glorious moment of his return, and then ultimately his forced retirement and how that all ended. But I think when you look at the Sheriff's career as a whole, he's done pretty much everything that there is to do in KOW. He, like say, if it wasn't for him, would there Rick Marcus or Will Carter or Two Bit have done as well? Maybe. Would they have had not an easy time, but I'm Sheriff being up on shows and showing that somebody from the academy could succeed and could do well, I'm sure made a big impact on them, and that when they came up, he was able to sort of take them under his wing a little bit and show them the ropes. So definitely somebody who deserves a lot of appreciation for everything he did. He wasn't one of the guys on the first show, but that doesn't matter at all. I'd say he's been just as important to KOW as, the Nightmares, Craig Collins, Sean Daisy, Taylor West, Chris Ridgway, those guys who were on the very first show. KOW would not have been the same without Sheriff Steele. I think Lucas Neon touched on the fact that he brings the fun to wrestling, but can also be really serious and violent when he needs to be. I think his character has always been one of my favourites in KOW, and the fact that he can go from having a tag match where he pours ice down another wrestler's trunks, or gets tired out because he's run too much, to having a brutal Sheriff's Rules match with Rick Marcus, or going toe to toe with a Nightmare, who's one of the most talented, and athletic and high flying wrestlers in KOW, shows how diverse he was as a wrestler and his ability to adapt to that, and also as a character that could go from being more lighthearted and a little bit goofy and silly to, when the time needed and when things are on the line, or when his family's been questioned or insulted, he can put on his serious face. And you don't want to mess the sheriff when he's serious, but if you stay on the right side of him, you'll have a hell of a lot.
Absolutely. You can definitely tell that he's somebody that you definitely want to have as a friend rather than a foe. And obviously, it was a tremendous honor to be able to talk with Sheriff Steele. And we thank him for all that he has done on behalf of KOW. Listen, he was definitely a different wrestler, or a different type of champion than what we saw in the War Machine, Craig Collins, and certainly a Chris Ridgway. But I think that his place in KOW history is right up there when it comes to Mount Rushmore. And speaking about wrestlers, though, that are on top of Mount Rushmore, and I know for you, and I know this is something that you wanted to talk about, and obviously this hit the professional wrestling world very hard. And for our worldwide audience listening here on Sportinarium ALP, I want to get your thoughts on the passing recently of Danny Havoc and what he meant to you, and I know what he meant to so many others.
Yeah, so Danny Grant Birkland passed away on May 31st of 2020. So he was just recently the year anniversary of his death. He was an American wrestler, a deathmatch wrestler. I don't know how familiar you are with deathmatch wrestling, Tom, but I know you've mentioned before about being a fan of ECW, so you've definitely seen some of the violent side of professional wrestling as well as the sweet science of it. But yeah, so he teenage ALP, because we all go through that phase when we're a teenager where we want to be a little bit edgy and rebel against the parents a little bit, that sort of thing. So when I started to get back into wrestling, probably when I was about 13 or 14, was the first time I knew about sort of ECW, and I'd also seen some TNA, because when I was a lot younger, as far as I was aware, the only promotion that existed was WWE. Like, that was it. I didn't know about WCW at the time. I didn't know about ECW. I didn't know about anything. And then my friend had Sky TV and used to have the wrestling channel, and TNA had pay-per-views and shows on there. So I came across TNA, and they obviously dabbled in a bit of the more, hardcore stuff, this and that sort of thing. And that led me to ECW and, the Ravens and the Sandmans and Tommy Dreamers and those guys. And then I was on YouTube one day, and I don't know how I first came across it, but I came across CZW, Combat Zone Wrestling, which for the longest time in America was the biggest deathmatch wrestling promotion going, basically, or one of them. And Danny Havoc was a wrestler for CZW. So teenage ALP came across CZW, was found about all these guys, and Danny Havoc really struck a chord with me. Early on in his career, he was quite scrawny. He had a big afro at one point, which I thought was really cool. I've always thought afro is the coolest type of hair anyone can have. I wouldn't suit it at all, but whenever I see somebody with a cool afro, I'm like, that's a cool dude. But yeah, and I watched him a lot, and a lot of his matches, some of his matches, his Cage of Death match with Sami Callihan, who's of course now been like Impact champion, and is huge, and he's also one of my favorites. But his Cage of Death match with Sami Callihan was incredible. And just, it's hard to put into words why you connect with a certain wrestler sometimes. I don't know if you have people like that where you just feel a connection to them, but he was phenomenal, and deathmatch wrestling gets looked down on a lot, by a lot of wrestling fans, and I've always been somebody who will fight and argue the case for deathmatch wrestling, even when setting up for a KOW show, because that's happened before. We've had discussions about the virtues of deathmatch wrestling, and yeah, he was one of the best, legitimately one of the best. He could go in the ring, he had incredible matches, his matches with Ricky Shane Page, his matches with Alex Colon, his matches with Brain Damage, Masada, Jun Kasai, like, he wrestled a who's who of deathmatch wrestling. He won Tournament of Death twice, and he was just a guy that when I was very young and when I was first discovering deathmatch wrestling, I really connected to him and really genuinely loved. He had his retirement match in CZW, and I watched that, and I was very emotional watching that, because like I say, I was a big fan of his and was very sad that he was going to be stopped wrestling, but in a way happy that he wasn't going to be putting his body through so much abuse, and that he was hopefully going to be happy and healthy. And then the news, honestly, when I found out, hit me like a truck. I still remember it was in the middle of lockdown, so not a time when I was doing particularly well, mentally anyway. But I woke up in the morning, in bed. What do we all do now? Roll over, pick up our phone, browse social media. First thing I did was pick up my phone, and an old friend of mine had messaged me and just said Danny Havoc's died, and I was devastated by it. Really, really upset. You know, I spent that day watching a bunch of his matches, which I did this year as well, and I think it's probably going to become, you know, somewhat of an annual tradition. I never got to watch him wrestle live. Sadly, that was on my bucket list of sort of wrestlers to see live, or things I wanted to do in terms of wrestling, was to get the opportunity to see him live. Sadly, I never managed to, but I did get, when I also in lockdown went through my binge of getting a bunch of tattoos. One of them I got was actually in memory of Danny. So Danny, he means a lot to me, and it's hard. I mean, anyone who has, even not in wrestling, you know, even when a big star dies, you know, a celebrity, an actor, a musician, or Chester Bennington, Robin Williams, whoever you want to mention.
Sure.
If anyone listening has someone like that they had that connection to when they die, Danny was one of those people for me. So, you know, a big impact on me. It is very sad, but now, like I say, I did it this year, but I think on the anniversary of his death, I will. And obviously, I watch his matches over time as well, because, like I say, legitimately, some of my favourite matches there were Danny Havoc matches. But, you know, I think every year now I will go back and watch some of his matches and just reflect and be glad and be grateful more for his life than try and be sad that he's gone. I mean, one of my most prized possessions I'm literally looking at now in my flat is, I think, Tournament of Death 11, I want to say. I might have got the number wrong, but I have a, like, sort of a foot by foot square piece of the ring apron from Tournament of Death, all the compares that year signed, and Danny's one of them. So I have his signature. You know, it's something I look at every day. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about some things. Like, I literally have one of his logos that he used to use tattooed on me, because he was the deathmatch Viking. So it's like a Viking shield with a sword and a blood spattered axe on it. So I've got that. So yeah, obviously, you know, when something's important enough to etch in your skin for the rest of your life, it's pretty important to you. So yeah, it's something that I carry with me. Somebody that I have a bunch of respect for. Somebody would have loved to see him wrestle live. Somebody I would have loved to have worked with. I don't know how he would have fit in KOW, but you know, if I had a short list of guys I would have loved to have brought in, you know, he would have been on that list, you know, along with, just to mention a couple, you know, Eddie Kingston, Sammy Callahan, a few people like that. But yeah, very important to me as an individual, and somebody who I will always point to. And whenever I have an opportunity to, a lot of the times people who know me will know that if I meet a new friend and they're new to wrestling, at some point I'm going to show them a death match, and most likely it's going to be a Danny Havoc match.
But obviously, most importantly, we want to send our condolences to every single wrestling fan. Obviously, the family of Danny Havoc, and you think about the career that he's had and so many people he's touched upon. And that's the great thing about wrestling, ladies and gentlemen, is that so many people can be brought together about it, and the memories will last a lifetime. And this is why we're very honored once again to have back on the Sports Report the #1 global sports show that is the heart and soul of KOW, that is booker and promoter of KOW. And at one time, he was the general manager and also did some ring introductions, and that is none other than the great ALP. And I am the host of the Sports Report, the Reverend Tom Bryce, now the station manager here of Sportnarium. And also want to mention a brand new sponsor that we have here on behalf of the station. That's our very good friends 1310 Apparel, which is a professional wrestling inspired clothing brand whose ultimate goal is to give back to the industry that has provided so many memories, but has also helped its creator through some testing challenges in life. 1310 Apparel has welcomed a wide range of sponsored athletes from across the globe within the industry, including new starters like our very good friend, the natural born fighter, RP Davis, who we know that the Cumbrian outlaw Rick Marcus has been a very, very good friend of. And obviously, he's a big supporter of 1310 Apparel as well, including also former IWGP heavyweight champion Will Ospreay. And we here at Sportnarium are delighted to team up with 1310 because of those reasons, because we can offer you an exclusive 30% discount. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Where are you going to find a better discount than that? So with this 30% discount, all you got to do is go to 1310apparel.bigcartel.com, and all you need to do when you get there is to add products to your basket, and then when prompted, you just apply the code SPORT30. That's SPORT30, and worldwide shipping is available to find out what fits you. And get over there to 1310apparel.bigcartel.com to get those savings now, and you can follow 1310 Apparel on Instagram at 1310 Apparel. On Facebook, you can like it, 1310 Apparel. You can also follow on Twitter at 1310 APP and find out why 1310 Apparel we're very excited to be working with, and cannot thank them enough for their support and friendship. And everybody can follow the Sports Report and Sportnarium on Instagram and Twitter. And Twitter, we're at Sportnarium WW, and on Instagram, we're at Sportnarium. You can like us now on Facebook at Sportnarium Media. media and at Sportnarium Radio, and cannot thank enough everybody for their support of the Sports Report. And you can also always listen to us on YouTube at the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show, and on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/Sports Report 2019. We are back on Instagram, ALP. Whatever reason, I was deleted this past Sunday on Instagram because I had posted a clip from the Floyd Mayweather-Logan Paul fight. I probably should not have wasted my energy on that, but I did enjoy the fight for what it's worth. And I had actually posted a clip on Instagram, and well, I was deleted off Instagram, but I am back on now at the Sports Report 2021. So thankfully that has not been deleted off, but we are definitely happy that ALP has not deleted us from his support and friendship, from all the great things that he is doing that we get to talk about when it comes to KOW. And ALP, for our worldwide audience listening here on Sportnarium, I got to ask you about 2-Bit, because 2-Bit came on a couple of weeks ago, and I think it's even a new 2-Bit from the last time we spoke with him, and the last time certainly we saw him in a KOW ring. And the Rat King definitely has a lot to say. It looks like he has a manager/valet in his side in Jennifer, and obviously 2-Bit looks like he's primed and poised for a huge 2021, even though if he wasn't in the best of moods, we always still love 2-Bit here on this show. But for our worldwide audience listening here on Sportnarium, because I know that he did address KOW, I have to get your thoughts on what the Rat King 2-Bit had to say.
So yeah, in terms of 2-Bit, of course, he, like you say, he has transformed himself during the course of lockdown, and he is looking different. And KOW fans will be familiar with what a massive threat he was before we had to temporarily close our doors. So I am a little bit concerned about what 2-Bit is going to bring to KOW when he returns. I know that he's training really hard. I know that he's in phenomenal shape. Obviously, like you mentioned, I know that for OPW, obviously that video went out with obviously him and Jennifer. So that's interesting. That's an addition. That's something he hasn't had before. Obviously in KOW he has the underclass, but I think Jennifer will probably bring something a lot different, I would suspect. Again, I've had no conversations with Jennifer or anything like that, so she's not involved in KOW at the moment or anything like that. But I'm definitely very interested. Of course, you know, he's going to be a few different promotions, and I know he's made it clear that he wants championship gold in KOW. And before the show that was meant to take place in March 2020 was cancelled, he was due to fight for the heavyweight championship. And from everything I can tell, you know, he has his sights set on that. That's definitely something I could see happening in the future. You know, he was really coming into his own towards the end of 2019. He'd lost the Showcase Championship, but in a way that worries me that that's fueled him more, because from knowing 2-Bit, he is the sort of person who will sit and stew and get angrier and angrier and angrier until it boils over. And when it boils over is when bad things happen in KOW. You know, Ethan Edwards getting attacked with a bat, Nightmare getting a glass bottle smashed over his head. There's a massive list of moments that you can tell is just 2-Bit boiling over. And what worries me is I was worried enough, you know, between our last show of a year and the first show of the next one, you know, there's usually sort of a 4.5 month wait, and that's a long time for KOW. And I was already worried about what he was going to do in March, because of course when we would, like, say, that show we had scheduled for 2020, he sent numerous videos to KOW making it very clear he felt underappreciated and that he deserved a heavyweight championship shot. And in the end, his mouth is what got him that title match that it did eventually get cancelled, of course, because of COVID. And now, you know, our last show was November 2019, so I can't do the maths right now, but if we're looking at September, that's what, 21 months since he's last been in a KOW ring, last wrestled, last had an opportunity to spew his venom towards the KOW fans and the roster. So yeah, I am worried, and I think people in KOW, you know, the wrestlers should be worried. You know, he's got a lot of axes to grind. I'm sure as things get closer and closer to us being able to run a show again, you know, he's been relatively quiet recently. As far as I know, he hasn't been berating any of, you know, the KOW management or berating myself about things just yet, but I'm waiting on it. And I suspect, you know, when we do have a show announced, I'm expecting to get an email or a DM or a publicly posted video of 2-Bit angrily declaring what he wants. But yeah, I'm worried. Him, Decker, Jax, I like everyone in KOW, but 2-Bit especially, he's the type of personality, the type of wrestler where he's clearly taken that anger and that frustration and channeled it into improving himself. And, you know, as we've said, he was probably, like, we didn't have a vote or a list or anything to confirm this, but he was the wrestler of 2019. You know, he appeared most on the top 10 list. He was putting in incredible performances. You know, I think him forming the underclass really gave him that extra dynamic and that extra backup to ensure that he could get what he wants. And when we do return when the Rat King is fully unleashed on Barrow again, I'm going to be ducking and running for cover. I can say that much.
Well, I'm glad I'm in New York these days when it comes to the Rat King 2-bit and his new and improved look. And I would be very, very worried and very, very leery of being in a match with the Rat King 2-bit, especially with the Rat Trap. So if I'm one of his opponents, I would definitely be very, very worried about being in a match with him. And obviously, we are looking forward to the future of 2-bit. And obviously, we're excited to see what he does in the ring. And obviously, we're very happy. We're on the Sportnarium on the radio side of things, so we don't have to deal with the wrestlers in that form. So obviously, we're very happy that we're not in the wrestling industry, my friend, when it comes to that. But you did mention Decker, and Mr. Decker, as always, has a lot to say. And Mr. Decker is a free agent, so we do know that Mr. Decker is definitely up for the bidding, and he definitely wants to get paid these days. And Mr. Decker even had some thoughts for Sheriff Steele, and we know that Sheriff Steele versus Andre Decker cannot happen in a KOW ring, but we have offered to promote that match. So certainly, we will certainly see, now that I am part of the powers that be at Sportnarium, what we can do to make that match happen, maybe in the WWE, maybe somewhere else in another promotion. But we do know that Andre Decker is a free agent. He had a lot to say. He wants a rematch for his tag team title and wanted to get your thoughts on what Mr. Andre Decker had to say about the KOW universe and all things related to KOW, and also if he's going to get a rematch for his tag team championship that he and Jackson lost.
So in terms of Andre Decker, again, he's a very dangerous compare. I mean, the point can be proven by the fact that I believe I'm correct in saying that it was only his third match in the company where he won the tag team championships. It was only his second tag team match. Previously, he'd had a different partner, and of course, as part of the underclass and somebody, you know, who's aligned with 2-bit, and again, Jax as well. He poses a real threat. I know that 2-bit's mentioned going after the heavyweight championship, and obviously Decker and Jax, I assume, would have, and obviously they do have their eyes on those tag team championships, which they lost at the 7th anniversary show. Now, as I've mentioned previously, you know, we don't really do automatic title rematches, you know, unless there maybe sometimes if there was some sort of unfair end to the match or something like that, it would happen. But, you know, they got beaten fair and square. And KOW, if you've got beaten fair and square, even if you were the champions, you still need to prove yourself. Jax and Decker did show they were an incredibly formidable tag team. You know, they held the titles from the first show of 2019 and lost them on the last show of 2019. So they had a very impressive run as champions. But again, you have to prove yourself. Lucas Neon had to prove himself to get that match with 2-bit, the leader of the underclass, to beat him and become showcase champion. Craig Collins had to earn the opportunity by winning Road to Gold to face Taylor West and become KOW champion. Nightmare and Will Carter, the Freak Show, they had to beat Big Guns Joe and Isaiah Quinn to earn a shot. The 3 current champions, none of them were handed a shot. None of them were just, okay, here you go. You can have a title match. Here you go. Here's a free little present for you. You know, you get a title match. They all proved they earned it. And the same rules apply to them that apply to Decker, Jax, 2-bit. They will have to prove themselves and prove that they deserve the opportunities that they want. I'm certain Decker and Jax will most likely challenge for those titles again. But like I say, lads, prove you deserve it. If we are back in September, I'm sure you'll be in action. I'm sure you'll be looking for an opportunity to prove yourselves if you are as good as you say you are. So yeah, step up, prove that you can do it, prove that you deserve it, prove that you should have a chance to compete for those titles and to become the first time 2-time KOW tag team champions. That's just it. Prove it, lads, and you'll get it.
We're going to definitely find out. We know that Mr. Decker is definitely going to be listening. We know that Mr. Decker is a free agent. So KOW looks like, listen, ALP is basically saying that, look, Andre Decker, you want to be a tag team champion again, you're going to have to go out there and earn it. You're going to have to go out there and prove it. We'll certainly see what happens when it comes to Andre Decker. And somebody we had on the show last week who, in a lot of ways, ALP, I think, is really becoming ingrained in the world of professional wrestling. And she's very knowledgeable. She's somebody who knows her stuff, and maybe you're grooming her to be a protege. I don't know what it is, ALP, but Lucy Simons, she knows her stuff when it comes to not only KOW, but all of professional wrestling. I mean, her passion for professional wrestling, I think, is as good as anybody's I've spoken to in a very, very, very long time, and obviously including yourself. And Lucy Simons looks like she's somebody that knows her stuff. She's on her way way to bigger and better things. She's been obviously a very big part of KOW and putting together these matches here for the top 10 matches of KOW in 2019. And I gotta tell you, ALP, she could have talked about all those matches one by one, including the other 20 matches that she didn't have on the list that you guys had in 2019. So for a worldwide audience listening here on Sportnarium, ALP, I gotta ask you then, KOW official reporter Lucy Simons, and what she had to say and your overall reactions.
Yeah, I was really interested in listening to Lucy's interview because I think she brings a unique perspective to things in that she writes about and, is obviously part of the extended KOW family, but isn't, she travels into the shows, so she is more like a fan, she has that fan perspective and can look at things, as a fan. And that to me makes it really interesting. Obviously, it's always nice to get somebody else's point of view on KOW and what they think of it. It's always nice hearing nice things, of course, but valid criticism is always good to hear as well. And that's the thing I think with Lucy. Obviously, she talked about how she just messaged the page, the KOW Facebook page, because like she said, her first show was wanted. And obviously at the time, I didn't know that, of course, I didn't know that Lucy specifically had come to this show. And, the first time I was aware of her was that, like she mentioned, she put up a clip from Collins versus West versus Nightmare, which was that night's main event, and she shared it, and it was a little clip of the match, and she said something very nice, and so of course we were like, okay, cool, here's a clip. Somebody said something nice, we'll share that. So of course we shared it, and we were like, yeah, here's a little clip, cool. And so that was the first time I came across a name, knew about her. Of course, I didn't know what she looked like, I didn't know where she came from, I didn't know her story or anything, but that was the first time I came across her. And then, like she said, a couple of shows later, I think just on a whim, she was like, might as well shoot my shot and message the page. And I just happened to be the person who manages that and monitors that, and so I was the one who got the message, and I was like, yeah, sounds cool. KOW is all about giving people opportunities, and I was like, what have I got to lose if she writes a match report and it's badly written and it's grossly wrong, or I don't like it for whatever reason, then fine, I can say it's not going to work out. And of course it wasn't. It was great, it was really good, and it was really well written, and it was going to add something new that we didn't have, because of course we post our show results, we post stuff on the page, but in terms of a more detailed breakdown of how the matches went, and more of a long form write-up, that wasn't something we had, and something I thought would be cool for diehards, that somebody who didn't know about KOW might come across and get an interest based off that. And of course, whenever something comes up, I always think of where things could go. They don't always get there, but I always think about it, and I was like, well, cool, if we got somebody who's a writer and enjoys doing that and is legitimately a fan of the product, because that was part of what interested me as well, is that I knew she came into it as a fan, and it wasn't somebody who just was a writer and was looking for a gig, or it was somebody who legitimately seemed to have an interest and a passion in the company, which is what we want. Of course, we want to reward people and involve people who are passionate about wrestling. And yeah, it's sort of strange because we've never properly had a chance to like hang out or chat really, because usually when I see Lucy, it's on a show day and I'm running around and I'm making sure everything's set up, and you move that over there and this is happening here, and you know what you're doing, and it's very busy. So a lot of the time it's sort of I get to say hi to people, chat for a couple of minutes, and then a little bit at the end, and that's it. And hopefully, when things do open up again, we are going to be able to, maybe have a beer and, hang out a little bit more and get to just sort of chat on a personal level. But yeah, she really puts a lot of energy and passion in it. Like I say, she clearly cares about wrestling. She clearly really enjoys coming to the shows, and like I say, she gives a unique perspective to things. She's written some really cool articles for us. She did like retrospectives of the Taylor West and Craig Collins feud and Rick Marcus and Sheriff Steele feud. She did stuff on that. She did a predictions list for 2020, which obviously now is unfortunately sort of a strange relic of time for the year that never was, but those sorts of things. And of course, it's cool to think of other things she can do, like in future. Obviously she did the top 10 matches of 2019, but I'm thinking in the future, could there be a wrestlers of the year? Could there be moments of the other things we can do? She's interviewed members of the roster, much like you do, but in written, obviously like this, probably via a call, but in written form before shows and things like that. So it just opens up a whole other avenue that we can go down creatively. It offers something different that, like I said, might attract a fan or just interest a fan, or gives diehard fan another perspective and something to look at. Like she said when she was doing the list, a lot of wrestling is opinion based, and if you go to, there's lots of amazing wrestling companies in the UK, but if you go to each one, they do things differently. And I might go to a show and like some things and dislike other things, but then the person who runs that show might come to our show and still like some things and dislike some things. So like she says, it's all about that opinion. But yeah, I think she had something really unique. She's always been really professional. Her writing is really good. You know, she is enthusiastic and passionate about it. You know, she's part of the extended KOW family, and we're really glad that she did decide to send that message. And obviously, it's cool to see that now other opportunities are opening up for her, and you know, she's going to be working with LPW and doing interviewing, which is something that's newer as well, and that's really rewarded. You know, she absolutely earned the opportunity, and you know, in KOW and in wrestling, I like to think, and the world in general, people earn their opportunities. But much like seeing a 2-bit go from a shy 12-year-old to a 20-year-old who looks like a beast, and you know, is ready to blow up the UK wrestling scene, still in the same way, seeing a Lucy who, you know, shot a shot and was like, okay, let's just ask, and you know, did really good work, is being rewarded for doing good work, and you know, that's being acknowledged by other people. And obviously she works for the mid-carders now and writes non-KOW related stuff, over general wrestling related stuff. You know, she's gonna be working for LPW, so that's really cool. And you know, it's cool to know that KOW, you know, the company that I'm involved with and many other people involved with, are helping people to get these opportunities. We're not responsible for that, of course, not at all. It's Lucy's hard work that's got her there, but it's nice knowing that we gave somebody a platform, and with that platform, which is what we hope, much like the wrestlers we have on, we hope they manage to find a bigger platform, and that's what Lucy's doing. So it's cool, and it's cool to see somebody who isn't a wrestler take that journey as well.
Absolutely, and as always, a huge shout out to Lucy Simons, and obviously it was a tremendous honor to be able to speak with her and talk all things related to KOW and her start into professional wrestling, alongside the news that she broke on last week's show that she'll be doing some interviewing for Odyssey Pro Wrestling when their debut show takes place August 7th, set sail in Morecambe. So we're obviously very excited to always talk KOW and OPW. And ALP, before we get your closing thoughts, you know, I got to ask it to you because I ask it to you each and every time here. And what's the latest with KOW? Any news, anything else on the KOW front that our worldwide audience listening here on Sport Area, and also the KOW fans would be curious to know?
So yeah, a couple of things. Of course, we uploaded the 30-minute Ironman match recently. There are going to be more of those sort of classic KOW matches coming out, so do keep your eyes peeled for them, because there's some real good ones in there. We started off really strong with the Ironman match, but there's definitely a bunch more in the KOW archives that I think either fans who were there for it will love reliving, or people who haven't watched them before will really enjoy, and it'll help them get a flavour of KOW and its history. Unfortunately, we don't have a definite return date yet, but I did want to give a bit of an update in regards to, I know there are probably a lot of KOW fans that are sort of waiting. I know we've had some messages asking and things like that. So just to generally update, we are hoping that we can be back in September still. The date, because obviously when 2020 was coming to an end, we arranged dates with our venue for 2021, so you know, we'd have them there and ready for whenever we were ready to go. So the date we have penciled in is September 11th. So if we are back in September, that would be the date, unless there's, you know, obviously this is all subject to change because it's wrestling, so anything could change. But yeah, that is when we're looking at, and there is work going on. We've currently got a poster that's in the works. We've currently got some matches being put together. Also, that there are rumblings, there are things happening. It's just not in front of all of you guys at the moment. And the hopes are, we're obviously monitoring and reviewing the situation. We're hoping to have a better idea and be able to make a decision and commit to running a show, hopefully the end of this month, maybe early next month, because obviously we had to cancel that show in March 2020, which I mentioned earlier, and we don't want to go through that again. Personally speaking, that was one of the worst days I've had having to cancel that show. It really sucked. So, you know, we don't want to do that, as well as in terms of the effort and money involved, of course, in promoting a show, you know, printing posters, putting them up, promoting things, you know, all the things that go into paying for and putting effort into running a show. And also we will consider it if things move on, but we would rather return when it's going to be KOW as it should be, a full venue, not having to have certain measures in place. Obviously, those measures are there because they are needed, of course, and that's why they're there now. But we would ideally like to return when we can have a full house, because obviously if we can, then we have to look at, do we have to put the ticket prices up? We have to have, you know, separated seating, one-way systems, and all that stuff comes along with the being COVID safe. And that is something that, you know, we would rather not do. Of course, if we do get towards September or towards the end of the year, and it looks like that is the only way that we are going to be able to run a show, we will then look at that and make a decision about that. But ideally we want to be back as KOW should be. The other thing as well that's the issue is the social distancing element, of course, and our venue does not have a lot of backstage space, so that would be a concern we'd have to look at as well. But yeah, sort of a little bit there in terms of nobody, like say, apologies to anyone who's hoping for something more concrete, but I wanted to at least let people know there are things going on, and hopefully in a month or so we'll be able to be like, yeah, here's the poster, September 11th, we're going, let's announce some matches, let's sell tickets, let's do this. But like I say, we're being tentative, we're being cautious, we appreciate people being patient with us. Obviously there are promotions who are starting to run again. I know there is literally there was a show on Sunday where I live, so British wrestling is starting to open up again, but that was all socially distanced and with proper COVID safety precautions, so that is still something that people are having to go through in terms of running shows now. So yeah, like I said, a little bit of an update, hopefully not too much of a tease, and hopefully people will take this as a sign we are, fingers crossed, with the vaccine rolling out and everything moving in the right direction, and that hopefully September 11th will be our next show, and that when I'm hopefully back here again on the Sports Report, we'll be able to say, yes, there's a show, and here's some matches, and yeah, let's go, let's do this, and get fired up and G'd up, because I know everybody is going to be when we do finally announce that.
And I know ALP, we're going to be fired up to be talking about some matches. We're going to be very fired up to be promoting that here on the show in the coming weeks leading up to that. So listen, we'll see what happens. We'll try not to get too excited. Hopefully when you come on next month, we'll have a little bit more clarity, a little bit more judgment about where we are. And obviously we're extremely excited though about the future of KOW. The future is definitely Neon, obviously Lucas Neon as well. Huge shout out to Lucas Neon, and also a huge shout out to everybody here in KOW, also past, present, and future. So we are looking forward to continuing to talk about KOW, and a rising tide lifts all boats, and we know that we are definitely going to get there. And for you, my friend, I want to give you the floor. I want to give you the closing thoughts. As always, plug where all of our listeners can keep up to date with all the great things that you're doing. And we're going to plug KOW one more time for you, because obviously we've become very ingrained with the company. So everybody can follow KOW on Instagram at K_O_wrestling, on Twitter at KO_wrestling, and on Facebook you can like it at Knockout W. You can find out why KOW is one of our favorite companies, and you can watch a great match like Craig Collins, the War Machine, versus Chris Ridgway, 30-minute Iron Man match for the title. So we've done that for you. So you know the drill, my friend, though. In the meantime, plug all of your social media, anything you else want to say to the fans listening here on Sportnarium, and can't thank you enough as always, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, so thanks once again, Tom, for having me on. It's been a pleasure as always talking to you and just chatting wrestling. It's always a lot of fun, and hopefully it's been enjoyable for everybody listening as well. One promise I will make is that whenever we are running a show and whenever I am on Sportnarium to promote that show, I will make sure we have an exclusive match announcement for you, and for all listeners of the Sports Report, that's something I'm excited to do. But yeah, a big thank you again to everybody for listening. Like Tom said, obviously do follow KOW, and that's where you're going to be able to see the classic matches and keep up to date with what's going on, and hopefully get that show officially announced. You can follow me on Twitter at ALP Streams. I also have a Facebook page, ALP Streams. I haven't streamed in like a month, so I might have to change my Twitter handle at some point. I've been too busy playing Fortnite and Resident Evil 8, unfortunately, so I haven't been streaming very much. But yeah, hopefully I'm going to get back to that. ALP Streams on Twitch as well, if I ever do pull my finger out and actually decide to do some more streaming. And yeah, and that's the place to go. If you want to get in touch about bookings or anything KOW related, then like I said, the best place is the KOW socials. That is the best place to go for that. And like say, ALP Streams, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and that's where I occasionally will post some things and talk about stuff, sometimes wrestling related, sometimes not. But yeah, that's where you can keep up to date with me.
Absolutely. And listen, you may have not streamed recently, but you still stream more than us, and we'll always be happy to promote you regardless. And we're extremely excited about the future of KOW. Listen, one way or another, we'll continue to talk KOW, because I got a pretty good feeling we're going to have on more guests for KOW, and I'm gonna not spoil it who we're gonna have also on next week when it comes to KOW related. So I'll leave that as a catch-22 for our worldwide audience listening on Sportnarium, but I'm sure they'll be very familiar with the guests that we'll have on to kick off next week's show. So we'll just leave it at that. But for you, my friend, I cannot thank you enough. I'm looking forward to round 4 with you next month, and probably talking about another great match or two. And who knows, maybe an exclusive match announcement, maybe an announcement with an official date, but it's looking good. It's moving in the right direction, but we're not going to get ahead of ourselves, but we're going to leave it at that. And we're going to continue to look forward, though, to continue to talk the future of KOW and the great things that this company has done as they're getting ready for their 9th anniversary. Time definitely passes, my friend, but congratulations on all the success. We're keeping our fingers crossed for that big announcement and can't wait to do it with you again for round 4 next month.
Yeah, definitely.
As we're here on the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show with the heart and soul of KOW, and that's Booker and promoter. Hey! As I am the host of the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show, the Reverend Tom Bryce, and also the station manager here at Sportnarium. And we were just with ALP, booker and promoter of KOW, and also former general manager. And stay tuned for more hard-hitting analysis here on the Sports Report and on Sportnarium as we talk with Wildfire Nate Reese to talk all the latest happenings of the past, present, and future of professional wrestling, as we are just with KOW booker and promoter ALP, talking all things related to KOW, including the 30-minute Iron Man match between the War Machine, Craig Collins, and Chris Ridgway for the KOW Heavyweight Championship, and also control of KOW. So stay tuned for more hard analysis here on the Sports Report and on Sportnarium with pro wrestling star Wildfire Nate Reese.